the dual parental function of the two, their chance to bring to birth the true Christ child in the physical body, his womb, and Christianity apart and set the bodily pole in enmity against its positive twin. The opposition of forces was mistaken opposition of evil against good or God. Fascinating. It's very fascinating. You can always yeah.
Magnifying glass. Okay.
Well, thank you for being here.
Thank
And start on to finish page 89. Yeah, yeah. Be paid and of course Jesus Christ is after infusing Jesus Christ is now here infusing me and the world with his light and wisdom. Together, Jesus Christ is now here in the world with his light. That story is us the Messiah Son, who just as Joseph, the adoptive father of Jesus, provides shelter and food for his son, so Joseph cares for Horace, the consort of Seb, named Nu. Mary, M-E-R-I, Mary is a name among the Messiah. That's not interesting. Massey concludes, quote, thus Seb and Mary, for earth and heaven, would afford the two mythic originals for Joseph and Mary as parents of. There are 7 different Marys in the 4 Gospels. uncanny fidelity to 7 Marys or Hathors in the Egyptian. Oh, what?
Faced with such a body of facts, I had absolutely no question left. The evidence beyond, I believe we can say with total assurance that the Jesus who was administered to by Judas of the grave, resurrection and life, the fourth and also
I'm going.
in Egypt.
Have no. Okay. Yeah.
Don't you know everything is in divine order?
Yeah.
Then 15th of the spring month, Nisan also was spiritually crucified in Egypt, as it is written in Revelation 11:8, as judge of the dead, with sheep on his, as Kuhn has agreed. Yeah, Egyptian from first to last, in every phrase from the beginning to the end. There is an undeniable irony and profound, deep, undeniable truth in Hosea's prophetic saying, "Out of Egypt have I called my son." A deep irony indeed.
And somebody take the last one?
Once again, it is absolutely critical to stress that my argument that the Christ of the Gospels and an antecedent in Egypt and in many other places and cultures as well is not part of any attempt to debunk Orthodox Christianity. Nothing is further from my mind. My aim instead is to reveal the truly spiritual nature of the Christos archetype in all of human history, and ultimately to explain what this will mean to us.
Yeah. It's amazing to think about in all these 2,000 plus years, if we'd have heard the truth and been taught this, imagine how life would have been different.
Yeah.
How much more sense this all would have made. This position for me gets to be a little difficult sometimes because as I'm reading, my shadow ends up right on the text where I'm trying to read.
Yeah, it makes a lot, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, you see what we have.
Well, you can move over a little bit so that light's not right over your head.
I know. I'll just suffer. Convincing the skeptics. This is a quotation from Gerald Massey, his book, The Historical Jesus and the Mythical Christ. Considered as those of a human being, the character and teachings of the Christ in the Gospels are composed of contradictions and opposites impossible to harmonize. In fact, the many hundreds of sects and denominations of Christians who are today engaged in formulating the theology of their assumed founder in denying each other's interpretation do but inevitably represent the organic disunity from the beginning and reflect the fragmentary nature of the origins. The general assumption concerning the Gospels is that the historic element was the kernel of the whole, and that fables accreted around it, whereas the myths, being pre-extant, prove that the core of the material was mythical, and it then follows that the history is incremental. The worst foes of the truth have ever been the real rationalizers of the mythos. They have assumed the existence of a personal founder of Christianity as the fundamental fact. They have done their best to humanize the mythos by discharging the supernatural and miraculous in order that it might be accepted. Thus, they have lost the battle by fighting it on the wrong ground.
Yeah, and the existence of a personal founder of Christianity, which was not Jesus. And I've had to remind a few of the fundamentalists that Jesus was an observant Jew, and he did not start Christianity.
He wasn't a Christian,
No,
exactly.
No, that was Paul. And Paul had to create his own religion because he was not accepted by the disciples as a true disciple.
Yeah.
So he finally went off and created his own religion. And
He never studied with Jesus. He never
No.
learned from Jesus.
not that we know of now.
The only encounter is the one he talks about as that moment when
He fell off his horse.
Yep.
Yeah. And that was
and hit his head. So to
and that
speak.
was the true encounter with Jesus, was the Christ image.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He got some things very right,
Yeah.
and there are other things where it's his theology and not Jesus.
Yeah, and some of that was written by Timothy, and Timothy had his own take on things. Like the women need to cover their heads in church and go home,
Yep.
shut up and go home and listen to their husbands.
Yep.
And I thought, oh, we've heard that
And
for
be
too
sure-
many millennia.
Be sure my lunch is hot.
Yeah.
I heard my father so many times, Ike, the potatoes are cold. He didn't get up or do anything about it. He didn't cook.
You didn't have a microwave either, right?
No, not in those days. Nope.
Yeah, in those days.
So my mother had to come out and do that and warm them up for him.
Oh, I had an uncle who was like it. There'd be all of us relatives sitting around this big table in their house, and there'd be a dish on the table. He'd say, "What is that?" And she said, "Well, it's such and such." "Well, take it off the table."
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
So-
he'd have a black eye if he was my husband.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she'd take it off the table, and the rest of us would eat it later.
My father wanted everything piping hot. And by the time
Yeah.
you're cooking this stuff and getting it out on the table, and
Yeah.
then finally Dad sits down and is ready to eat,
It's gonna be cold.
it's going to be a little cooler than it was when
Yeah.
it went on the table. That happens. I've always been one, I don't care what temperature it is.
Yeah.
You know,
If I'm hungry.
I prefer lukewarm with a lot of things rather than
Oh, yeah, and
scald.
if it's burning hot, you can't eat it.
Oh, my father's mother would boil water on the stove, make her coffee, instant coffee, and immediately drink the whole thing.
Whoa!
Straight down.
I don't see how that
I
could
don't
be.
know how she did that.
I don't either.
Boiling water.
Whee!
She would do that. She also, when she had a sore throat, she'd swallow Vicks.
I had a brother-in-law who did that.
Oh.
Swallow Vicks.
Oh, I think that could kill you.
And they lived in spite of it.
How awful. Yeah. Somebody take that small paragraph and over to the next page.
Since most, if not all, of this material will be new and even unimaginable to many readers, and since it is so critical to the major arguments I present throughout, to expose any remaining skeptics to more relevant evidence. Remember, Our ultimate goal is a renewed spirituality focused upon and fueled by the Christ in you, the hope of glory, to quote St. Paul. As he says, we can do all the things through this Christ consciousness which strengthens us within. Our bodies are indeed the temples of God, whose Holy Spirit dwells in us always, no matter how we feel on any given day.
Yeah, that so fits with what I was saying earlier about
Yeah.
that hymn, and that it's that hymn. It struck me in the last couple of days. Wait a minute, that's sort of our keynote,
Yeah,
which is why I thought, well, if since I believe that concept, Christ in you, is so important for us to get, to not just be able to say it and know those words, is for it to be realized. And it's realized when it's real to us, when we've made it our own. And part of that is when we make the connection in consciousness with it. When we begin to realize, wait a minute, it can speak to me.
yeah,
It can guide and direct me. And we probably, if we really thought about it, we can find times in our lives when all of a sudden we seem to know what to do,
Oh, yeah.
or we understood something that we had no idea what it was all about before. Some question was just answered.
Yeah.
That comes through that divine channel in us, but we can consciously make contact with it.
I think it was Frank Judici that when somebody new would come in the church, everybody would turn around and say, "I behold the Christ in you."
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was neat. I mean, I got used to that.
It's a wonderful concept, and it's not so wonderful until we know it. You know, I thought, well, if we sing that last thing, now as I'm singing it, I'm hearing it. I'm hearing it from everybody else.
yeah.
And that's vibrating in my own mind as well. That's nothing but good.
When I took people into membership over all the years I was in churches, we had the people standing up front and we sang that to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like both of them, Bill Prevost, and I like the other one, which is the old one. I behold the Christ in you.
Yeah. Ah-da-dum, ba-da-da.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that
And
one
we could switch if you have another tune. It's the same words, identically the same words.
too. Yeah.
That's yeah, I've forgotten now. One of our old timers. Anyway,
As we continue to examine the similarities between the words and miracles of Horus and those of the Gospel Jesus, we will discover fresh, unsuspected insights and meanings in Bible texts that once seemed worn beyond belief, nonsensical, or simply inexplicable, comparing the two representative Christs helps us move out of old and now irrelevant and paradigms toward the universality of the much deeper message behind it all.
yeah, we've only seen just the with the old traditions, and you get into the mythos, and it's amazing holds the whole picture.
Yeah.
The nativity in the early years, Jesus' nativity will always be associated with the ox and the ass because of the stable and the manger. But those two animals were also with the Egyptian Eusa, ages upon ages before. What this earthy feature of the birth story is really about is the true esoteric sense. In the true esoteric sense, is the coming of the divine into the basic animal nature to create that wholly new reality, the human being, part animal, part divine. Significantly, both these animals are, in a way, asexual or crossovers, which suggests that ultimately the Christ in us is a melding of the male and female principles. Indeed, the Christ of Revelation has the breasts of a woman. Did you know that? Spirit, male, and matter, female, when brought together, ultimately become androgynous. This is the real meaning behind these words in Luke 20:34. Quote, those are given in marriage, but those who are considered in that age and in that resurrection for the nor are given in marriage. Indeed, they are like angels, being children of the resurrection.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
Children of the resurrection.
Yeah. Notice that Horace, who says, as he presents himself to earth, I am the baby born as the connecting link between earth and heaven, is paralleled completely by the infant Jesus, who came to bring, quote, glory to God in the highest and on earth of goodwill. Somebody take the next paragraph.
After the story of the birth of Jesus in Matthew, there is the threat from Herod that I alluded to in an earlier chapter. In the story of Horus, the life of the infant God is immediately threatened by an evil being called significantly Herod. But Herod is the serpent of many myths, Kuhn contends. The best other example is a serpent that tries to kill the infant Hercules, another savior figure who died and went to heaven.
In the New Testament, the angel of the Lord says to Joseph, arise and take the young child and his mother and flee into Egypt. At the birth of Horus, the god that says to the mother, come, thou goddess Isis, hide thyself with thy child. She's told to take him to a secluded spot in the marshes of Lower Egypt called Keb, or Kept. Interestingly, the heroic Sumerian king, Sargon, had to be hidden like Moses in a reed basket by a river, also to avoid being killed. Jesus, all four Gospels declare, was baptized in the river Jordan by his cousin John, who was dubbed the Baptizer. John was later beheaded by the Tetrarch Herod Antipas, 4 BCE to 39 CE, after Salome's famous dance. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was in the movie.
Blame it on Salome.
At the whim of his wife, Herodias, and his death signaled the beginning of Jesus' public ministry. Horus, as we have seen, was baptized in the river Eridanus, or Arutana, by the Egyptian John the Baptist, Anup, who was also later beheaded. Kuhn says that Horus in his baptism was transformed from the Word made flesh to the Word made truth, a change from the natural to the holy spiritual. Wow.
So you certainly found the beheading.
Yeah. Somebody take the next one.
Something I had never realized before was that each Christ figure of antiquity had his own special forerunner. In the case of Horus, Anup makes the path ready for his advent, although Horus preceded Anup in stature and authority. Anup, we are told, lived in the dark and empty reaches of Amenta, the Egyptian term for earth, until the day of his manifestation. In the Gospels, John the Baptist is said to have dwelt in the wilderness until the time of his showing forth, or public appearance in Israel. Anup, also known as Anubis, is the preparer of the way of the other world. He is the power making straight the paths to the upper realms of heaven. This instantly calls to mind Matthew's description of John the Baptist, Matthew 3:3. For this was he that was spoken of by Isaiah.
Isaiah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Isaiah.
Saying, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord, make his path straight.
Yeah. The minor deity, Anup, though distinguished, was only a star god. That is, a precursor to the much greater solar light, the sun itself. You heard me saying Son of God, and then saying S-U-N.
Yeah.
There is this concept of this spark that is in every one of us. And when I studied with the Kabbalists, they spoke about this spark, that in the beginning it was implanted in each one of us, and that is a spark of God, divinity. It's the Son of God inside us. And I recently read, and I can't remember where it was in the last couple of weeks, but it spoke about this, that there is this, well, it's in physics, these atoms, are they not glowing?
They are filled with energy, and they were thought to be empty in the earlier days until they smashed one of them and it blew up. Then yeah.
There is this energy in
Yeah.
there, which means there's light there.
Yep.
And we are a collection of atoms.
Yeah.
There really is no such thing as matter, as, this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because all this is made up of atoms. And atoms are so tiny.
Yeah.
And they're charges of energy. That's all they are. They're not a thing like this.
You're going to scare the atoms in the table if you keep pounding on it.
Exactly. I might put my finger
They're
right through them. Yeah. They're probably,
Now, somebody said if an atom were the size of the dome of St. Peter's Cathedral, the nucleus would still be too tiny to see.
yeah, amazing.
And the
Just-
nucleus is neurons and protons that run back and forth, and the protons go over to another, they exchange, and the atoms, they exchange these little bitty things. And in this constant exchange, what it does is knit that all together so your chair doesn't collapse under you.
It's,
Yeah, it's the atoms and that exchange that holds the chairs together that we're sitting on.
it's an electric universe.
Yeah, it is.
It really is.
Yeah.
Just charges of energy. Where did I stop?
Similarly, John,
Yeah, thank you. Similarly, John, though enormously important in the New Testament, was far surpassed by those enlightened by Jesus according to the Gospels. The least in the kingdom of heaven, it says, is greater than he. In other words, to be in the spiritual realm, to be incarnated, an incarnated soul, is to be greater than the one who symbolizes the natural animal man. The baptism of Jesus is in reality a symbol or glyph of the incarnating process that all of us take part in. The water he descends into denotes matter. Our bodies are about 2/3 water, and water is the symbol for matter in the ancient theology. The bird, like a dove, traced in Egyptian lore to Tef, the breathing force, stands in general for the divine energy of the soul. In the ancient Egyptian planisphere, or chart of the heavens, the star called Fact, which was the dove, was in the position to announce the coming of each new solar year, and hence of the sun god Horus. Horus, according to the myth, was given the hawk as his distinctive symbol, and he is often depicted as a hawk-headed figure. But Kuhn points out that he also rose from his baptism as the dove, for he exclaimed, "I am the dove, I am the dove." 7 doves, representing the sevenfold nature of all deific emanations, are frequently found described in words or pictures in arcane or esoteric religions. In Didron's Book of Iconography, for example, the child Jesus is depicted in the Virgin's arms, surrounded by 7 doves that symbolize the 7 powers he was to spiritualize. Yeah. So if I take the next paragraph.
Jesus and Horace received their baptisms at the age of 30. My research revealed that there is a gap in the life history of all the ancient sun gods between 12 and 30. Both numbers are symbols. They stand for the completion and perfection of cycles, the end of an age or stage of transition and transformation. At 30, each emerges as the adult god, or
Omfe.
Kuhn writes. Hey, that's interesting. I've never ever heard that.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Huh.
In the Japanese culture, a young man could not speak his mind until he was 30.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Age of wisdom.
According to Luke's unique account, Jesus is 12 when he stays behind at the temple in Jerusalem and engages the scribes in questions and discussion. This was universally acknowledged by the ancients to be the age at which each individual becomes aware of his or her soul within. It is the dawning of maturity, when the falsetto voice of innocent youth dramatically changes to the authentic voice of adult responsibility, and children are endowed with responsible knowledge of good and evil. Horace was 12 when he had his eye, which had been stolen by Soot, who corresponds to Satan, restored to him, a symbol of this basic rite of passage and of the dawning of the full intellectual faculty. These are the kinds of insights that excited and stimulated me most in the whole exploration. Somebody take ministry, teaching, and miracles.
In the Egyptian myth and symbolism, the kingly force of life, that is, the sun and the spiritual reality it stood for in each human being, was thought to be caught up in an ongoing struggle against elements seeking to limit or destroy its potency. This is why the December solstice was so crucial in all ancient religions. Thus the Christos, Horus, who represented the spiritual light, is depicted as constantly engaged in a giant spiritual warfare with various mythical creatures, including the seven-head dragon of darkness called Soot, and a variety of other names. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Soot, that's a good name for
Yes,
Satan,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
Soot.
Gospels similarly depict Jesus as the agent of light against darkness, involved in a running battle with its adversary, Satan.
The story of the temptation of Jesus, as told in the Synoptic Gospels, vividly symbolizes this, and again can be found in the Egyptian ritual in an earlier form. Horus is seized in the desert of Amenta, earth, and taken up a high mountain called Hetep by his evil twin and arch-rival, Soot for spiritual testing. Soot represents dark opposition to Horus, the good light at every step. But like Satan, he eventually is defeated. Jesus' cry about seeing Satan fall like lightning was preceded millennia before by Horus, when, in ultimate victory over Soot, he says to Osiris, his father, "I have brought thee the associates of Soot in chains." Of the three gospel accounts of the temptation, Luke's is particularly interesting in that he alone concludes, quote, "When the devil had finished every test, he departed from him until an opportune time." The contest, in other words, was meant to be understood as continuous. Once understood in its symbolic sense, it speaks at a much deeper cosmic level of the yin and yang of existence, the struggle to balance the polarities of life, light and dark, up and down, centrifugal and centripetal forces, hot and cold, and so on. Ancient religion was deeply connected to the realities of the universe at all levels, but the struggle of Jesus and Satan, or Soot and Horus, allegorically understood, is really about our own daily struggle here and now. The Christ within us gives us the victory. As Paul says, "I can do all things through the Christ who strengthens me within." Somebody take it from there?
Kuhn draws on his deep understanding of esoteric meanings and ancient long languages to create a fascinating take on the whole concept of Armageddon and supposed final conflict between the forces of Christ and Satan, or the Antichrist at the end of all things. He argues that the term Armageddon has nothing to do with the final armed battle in the Middle East or anywhere else at some supposed end of the world. He contends that it really stands for the ongoing struggle between essential evolutionary forces symbolized by Christ and Satan, and that it, at its most basic level, it has nothing but the whole battle of life each of us is now waging by day. Hell, for example, is right here, right now. The so-called Day of Judgment is an ongoing, present process in every life.
He's telling us what unity says.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very interesting from an Anglican priest. In reading this material, he's found the truth that he hadn't noted in quite that way before.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to see that. In the Egyptian ritual, when the associates of Soot came and seized Horus, they suddenly saw a double crown on his forehead and fell on their faces. Gospel readers know that when Judas and his associates came to the Garden of Gethsemane to apprehend Jesus, he asked them, in John's version, whom they were looking for. When they said, "Jesus of Nazareth," he said, "I am he." or in the plain Greek, I am. Once he said that, they stepped back and fell to the ground. Scene for scene, these two stories are the same.
Ed Rabel liked to tell that one.
Yeah, that's
He said Jesus had such incredible power that when he said, I am, it knocked them all to the ground.
yeah.
He was a little embarrassed about that, so he waited till they got up, and then he said it again in a softer way.
Mhm.
Whom do you seek, and all that sort of thing. I always found that interesting. He had that kind of just incredible power.
Yeah.
And you see these healers on stage, and people fall down under the
Yeah.
Spirit. Now that's the power of personality and so forth. They bring everything to bear on a particular person, which will knock them down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
But he took
what's-
out a whole regiment.
And hopefully we understand that power is in us too.
Yeah.
Anything, remember Jesus said that what he did, we can do.
Yeah.
And
Even greater.
and
Yeah,
greater.
Yeah.
You believe
Exactly.
in me. Yeah.
And that's part of us coming to the realization where it's real to us. And we begin to allow that energy to flow into and through us because it's always been available. It's
Yeah.
always been there.
Pushes back those negative energies that are always coming our way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember they used to do the TV program and they talked about Gardol that protected your teeth.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, put a shield over your teeth.
Yeah.
Well, that divinity within, the Christ in you, becomes your Gardol. It keeps us separate from this, the insanity outside,
Yeah.
the craziness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We couldn't walk on this planet without it. And watching the wars and stuff that are going on, these people don't have this consciousness of the power within them, and they think they have to go and attack somebody.
Yeah.
And it's going on and on and on and on. And it has, from time immemorial, there's always been skirmishes, wars,
Physical force with
Yeah.
physical force.
physical force, yeah.
And how can you fight for peace? It's the insanity of it. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it doesn't happen. According to all four Gospels, Jesus was a healer and an exorcist. You know what an exorcist is, right? Yeah.
Casting
Drives
out
the devil out of you.
Yeah.
Even the scholars of the controversial California-based Jesus seminar, hello, our friends,
Hello, Robert. Robert
about which I will say more in another chapter, admit that much. As Matthew chapter 15 describes it, great crowds came to him, bringing with them the lame, the maimed, the blind, the mute, and many others. They put them at his feet, and he cured them. But I was surprised to discover that Horace had much earlier opened dumb mouths and performed other Jesus-like healings. The act of giving a voice to those unable to speak was of particular significance in the Egyptian record. The inner meaning was that Horace's spiritual influence caused their lives to express the words of power and truth. This is the allegorical essence behind Jesus' healings too. The Christ within gives each of us the power to find an expression and express our own true voice. Somebody take over?
Horace,
Go ahead.
I just dropped the
Horace
lights.
restores sight to the blind, casts out demons, and makes the deaf hear. He is designated as he who dissipates the darkness. He is hailed as a prince in the city of the blind, as one who comes to shine into their sepulchres and to restore spiritual sight to the blind on earth. He is also described as opening the eyes of the prisoners in their cells. This was echoed by Jesus in his first sermon in the synagogue at Nazareth when he says, "He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind."
How about somebody take the next one?
Confronted by these similarities, I was forced to face the question that necessarily faces the reader now. What becomes of the gospel healings in the light of all this antecedent material in Egyptian scripts? There can be but one reply that is sincere. The New Testament miracles are virtually identical reproductions of ancient religious dramatizations and are not actual or historical occurrences. All of the gospel miracles of Jesus are historically impossible, Massey says, because they were already pre-existent as mythical representations and depicted in the drama of the mysteries. His point is that the miracles ascribed to Jesus in the Gospels had all previously been assigned to the pre-Christian Isa Horus, the divine healer, who was quite obviously non-historical. Horus, Isa, or Jesus is the performer of all the miracles later repeated in the New Testament. The miracles of the Gospels was mythical of the ancient religion and subsequent mysteries, all provably pre-existent. Massey includes, but it's important to stress that they were all pointing to a living, healing God behind, beneath, and within all things. The incarnate God heals those who call upon his power, his inner power. This is as true today as it was in ancient Egypt or in Palestine 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you think about it, he's essentially saying, nobody out there is going to do it for you. It comes through you. Gary Jones used to say to us, God can only do for you what God can do through you.
And only when you get out of the way.
Yep. We put up boundaries, we put up limitations. When, if we get out of the way, amazing, great, good can happen.
And
Yeah.
when that happens, the world tends to deny it.
Mhm.
One of the ministers in Columbia, when I was there, she was in Chicago for a week-long seminar, and she began to become very ill. And she got on a plane in Chicago, and she got to Columbia, Missouri, where we were, and took herself immediately to the hospital. They diagnosed her with sudden onset diabetes. She had lost 85% of her vision by the time she got to the hospital.
Oh.
And when somebody called me, I went up to the hospital, and she said, well, they're just teaching me to give myself insulin shots. And I said, would you like me to pray with you? And she said, oh, yes, please do. And this is the minister of a CME church, a black Episcopal church. And she said, yes. And I said, I'm going to pray a prayer that you've never heard before. So, just allow that presence of God to move in you. And so I started one of our prayers, the affirmative prayers. I moved that healing light from the top of her head back to her feet and back again, balanced the chemistry in her body. I went through just everything and said, thank you, God, it is done. Amen. She opened her eyes and she says, I never heard a prayer like that. And I said, I know you haven't, but just let it work. I saw her 2 or 3 days later. Her church was down the street from mine, and she said, the more insulin I gave myself, the sicker I got. And she said, so I went back to the hospital, and they told me I probably never had in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
That's the answer you get. As soon as there's something like this happens, doesn't go according to their standards, well, it never happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It must have been a
mistake.
a fluke test or something.
Yeah. I mean, this lady lost 85% of her vision, for God's
Yeah.
sake. But
Wow.
we just looked at each other and she said, I know. I said, yeah, I do too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing how that power works, and it's amazing that we can release it.
Yeah. And that's that Satan pushback, the darkness pushback when the light happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when God, it was 1970 when I had the opportunity to allow that to happen. And I was an idiot. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. I didn't know how to release that. I didn't know how to pray with somebody. But it worked. And my friend who was in a plane crash as the only survivor out of 4 people, after a month in the hospital, walked out of the hospital when they didn't think he was ever going to walk again, and they weren't sure he was going to live anymore. It happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he would tell me, only when you're here. I'd go every day to the intensive care. And his mother had introduced me as a brother.
Yeah.
So that, because then they would only let family in. So I was able to go there every day, and he would say, only when you're here can I sleep. Only when you're here am I out of pain. And all I'd do is sit there, and I'd just pray with him silently. And he could sleep. It was fine. But I didn't know how to do any of that. But I didn't do it.
Yeah. Know-how only gets in the way.
Yes. Yes. I just apparently got out of the way enough
And let it
Yeah.
happen.
and let it happen.
I don't know
Yeah.
how to do this, God, but bingo.
Well, it was it was strange happening because when I heard that, I actually saw in the newspaper that this plane crash had happened, and so I called the hospital and they said that he needed blood donors. So I went over the next morning, and I donated blood. Didn't have breakfast. I donated blood, went up to intensive care, met his mother, and then I passed out.
Yeah. You're supposed to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there I am coming to on this sofa with her putting a wet compress on my head, and her son, she doesn't even know if he's going to live in the next room. But when I left the hospital that day, I got in my car, and what was playing on the radio was Bridge Over Troubled Waters.
Yeah.
And in my own mind, I heard, somebody must know the truth. Will you know the truth? And in that moment, I committed that I would. And for 30 days, I went to the hospital every day. But all the rest of the time, my mind was always on him being whole and well. I'd sit there and I'd give thanks that he was whole and well.
Yeah.
I took a robe to the hospital one day, and the nurse said, "Oh, he won't need that." I said, "Well, just leave it here." The next day, they got him out of bed and got him up. These kind of things kept happening. I'd just make the right move, and he'd get better. It was just wonderful, wonderful. And I saw him after he got out of the hospital. I saw him once, and I never saw him again. Yeah. His mother went to Charles Roth's church in
Indianapolis?
Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Yeah. she was unity.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing. That was my job. That was for me to do, for me to be there, to witness that. And that was one of the most important things that caused me to decide to come to Unity School.
Yeah.
It was healing for you as well.
Yeah. I am so grateful he was willing to go through that. Because at some point he had to say, okay, I'll do this in order for me to have the opportunity. And it was amazing. That's the most dramatic event I've had in my life, because I've had other things that certainly said, God's right here and God's taken care of me. Because if that weren't the case, that I would have been shot dead in Las Vegas and other things like that, you know, because I had a guy stuck in me. He said he had put somebody in the Truckee River earlier that week. Yeah. And
What a lovely person he
yeah,
was.
yeah. It was interesting. So there have been but I've been saved so many times. It's just
Yep.
amazing. But I think we can all put, if we really thought about it, how many times? This past week,
Yeah.
Monday, Chris came in here and said, I'm smelling smoke. You know, whoop. And we started running through. You could, and in the light out in the hallway, you could see just this little bit of haze, and you could smell this thing. Took us a long time. I mean, we'd gone through the whole building, and then in the room that I call the press room, it's where the printer is, and it's also where some of the shelving is for food stuff and whatever. There's a table, and there's a desk, and under the desk is an outlet. And he happened to look down, and the outlet, all the way down to the baseboard, black. Black.
Oh, gosh.
And when we pulled the plug out, it came all apart. It had been on fire. And there's this blackness, total soot black.
Fortunately,
wall.
you got it pulled out without getting shocked or something.
It went out by itself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Close call.
yeah, absolutely.
I just remembered something I had completely forgotten. I was about 19, I guess, and I had my grandmother's Rambler, which I purchased. That was my first car.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Anyway, something happened. I don't remember what happened now, but I was going off the road, and I said, "God is in charge," loud, and it went off, but it didn't do anything. It just sat there, and I put it in gear and got back out again.
Yeah.
But it was close to
Yeah.
down a hill.
Yeah.
I was driving, I was still just a teenager, and I was driving into Indiana to pick up a friend and bring him back to Cincinnati. And these were country roads, and it started raining, and I hit a curve, and my car skidded, and I went over into a guardrail. There was a family in a car behind me. They stopped and said, because of seeing this happen to you, we realized that it would have happened to us. Because when you skidded, we stopped.
Yeah.
And I just had some little body damage. They had kids in the car, and that was amazing. They called my grandmother to tell her that I was okay and that the car was all right. Just what had gone on. They did wonderful things, you know. And I went on and I picked up my friend and we drove back to Cincinnati. The car was still drivable and all like that. Anyway, worked out very well. But people don't stop and help like that a lot of times.
No. Some do.
Some do, yeah.
Some
It's
do.
really, really wonderful.
Yeah, my Thunderbird had a
Just the very bottom paragraph. That is a really significant aspect to keep in mind as we consider the relevance of all this to our life and faith today. The healings remain tremendously important. Spiritually, the message is that the Christ or divinity within each of us can be called upon to aid us in all infirmities. In the Gospels, the disciples were fearful of an approaching storm, but Jesus was asleep in the stern of the boat. Like them, we need to awaken the Christ within and draw upon that resource. The healings of the Gospels are not canceled out, far from it. They are seen in their true light as illustrations of God's healing power yesterday, today, and always.
Yeah. When he says we need to awaken the Christ within and draw upon that resource, I think I prefer thinking we need to awaken to that Christ energy and power and resource within ourselves. Because God didn't throw us into this universe, into this world, into these experiences without us being provided with everything we need. And as I've been reading these, I realize we're totally provided for. It's all there. We just don't know to draw upon it. But everything we need, including what is required for healing to happen. So sometimes we need somebody to join with us, pray with us, or silent unity to pray with us. But ultimately, we have the ability to do it ourselves. To be so open, to be so awakened to that divinity that we allow it to do the work. But sometimes we need help. It's just easier for us. I think that's a good stopping point.
Yeah, my telephone light's getting dim.
Yeah. Oh, the light of God is going out.
Yeah, right. Charge the battery.
Heaven's going dark. I find this stuff so exciting. I really do. It's like a new breath. When I came to ministerial school, it was so much that was new. and it was exciting and wonderful. And then it was time for a renewal, to see it deeper, to see it clearer, and this is helping to do that, I think. Well,
You're talking about somebody stopping to help you. I had a Thunderbird. I love that car. But anyway, it was big. And I had a flat tire.
they didn't start out being big. The Thunderbirds
No,
were
but this
so
was
wonderful when they were small.
This was a 67. It was a four-door. That kissing door,
Means what?
the back door, and the
Back
front
door open backwards.
Oh, like, yeah.
Suicide doors.
Yeah. But anyway, I had a flat tire, and it was at night. And Daddy showed me how to change a tire, and I got out, I got the hubcap off, and I got the tire iron out, and I started to take the lug nuts off. And I pushed, and I pushed, and I stood on it and jumped up and down, and it wouldn't come loose. And some nice man stopped and took the lug nuts off for me. Said,
Yeah, I stopped and changed a tire for this elderly couple who were on a back road somewhere in Ohio. And they were standing beside this big Buick Road Monster. And I pulled in behind them. This man's face was red as a beet, and I thought, I need to change that tire.
Yeah, yep.
And so I cranked that puppy up there and got that wheel on there for them. You know, he was gonna kill himself trying to change that tire.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I don't know if I could do that now, but I was glad I could do it then.
Yeah, I don't know if I could do it now, but I did do that too.
Yeah.
Middle of downtown Cincinnati interstate traffic.
Yeah.
Two women were trying to change it, the older women, trying to change a tire in the middle of all this traffic.
ooh,
And I just pulled over and did it for them.
I couldn't believe I jumped up and down on that
Yeah.
tire iron and
Well, I kept a cross wrench, you know,
Uh-huh.
instead of that angle iron that you can't move anything with.
Yep.
Boy, I bought a cross wrench like that. And then I had a length of aluminum pipe.
oh, I'd
And
say
I
that
would put it
was-
on the end of that one and then
Oh,
bam,
yeah,
I'd
get
pull
you
that
some
thing
torque
off.
there.
Oh, man. Because 99% of the time, I am alone in the car.
Yep.
And I've traveled all over the country, and I
Yeah.
had to invent stuff to be able to rescue myself when
Yeah.
I got into something. Then I got into plenty. I went to California, you know, when a flatlander goes to California in the mountains, you really don't know what you're going to be faced with there. And I got into some real pickles there. I decided to go and just take a ride around a state park. And it was south of San Jose, and I was, so there was this wooden archway, and so I went through that, and it turned into a dirt road. And I'm going up into the mountains, and I thought, you know what, this is probably a maintenance road. But they usually take care of maintenance roads, so I kept going. Well, I got way up on that mountain and came around a curve, and I was on a cliff.
There was no
And there was
road.
a tree across the road. And I couldn't get out of the car because the cliff was about 3 feet from the car. I couldn't back up because I couldn't see the road.
Ooh, that would be scary.
That was, yeah, and I sat there and thought, okay, God, what do we do? And just sat there for a few minutes and opened my eyes, and I looked at that tree and realized that what was across the road were the upper branches, not the trunk branches. And I had a four-wheel drive Explorer at the time. So I put it in four-wheel drive, and I went crunching through the top of that tree until I got to the other side.
Yeah.
But when I started to open my left door and I'm looking down 1,000 feet,
Uh-huh.
I thought, well, shit, we're not going that way.
Yep. Oh.
Oh, man. So I get myself in pickles like that in California until I'd been out there for a while. If you're a flatlander, you just don't run into stuff like that.
I did that sort of craziness in not Las Vegas, the other
Reno?
Reno. Yeah, I was out doing hill climbing with my Jeep, just me alone.
Oh.
And I went up this hill and I hit loose scree.
When you start to go,
Exactly. And I was up pretty far up.
mm-hmm.
And it just started sliding back. And the last thing I wanted was that to roll.
Yeah,
And I was able to stop it. And then I put it in the very lowest gear and let it slowly go back down.
yeah.
And I got back down to the ground and I was,
Oh, I know.
I needed to get out and kiss the earth, you know. I just, thank you, God.
Yeah,
Yeah, 'cause that would I would have rolled that sucker,
yeah.
and it was a hard top, and those would have just all come apart.
I did that among the mines in West Virginia. This guy was in the Jeep with me. He says, "But you bet you'd be afraid to drive up that road." And I said, "Bet me." He took off up that road.
Oh.
And at some point, I was almost stopped because I was almost straight up. He jumped out.
Coward.
Yeah, he jumped out, and I thought, "Bet me, buddy."
Yeah.
Do you have a cap, sugar?
Didn't you have a cap?
I get it.
I'll screw it on for you.
It's not threaded.
Oh. Well, maybe it should be.
Maybe it should be.
Maybe it should be. Yeah. Too many books.
Too many?
books.
Too many books.
Oh, too many books.
I've got at least that many.
Yeah, we need.
Yeah.
We have 8 bookcases full.
eBay.
Yeah, I've got.
eBay, what would that do?
Sell them on eBay.
Oh, really? Can
Oh,
you?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
I sold 2 piles of books to some man, and he looked at them, and he said he wanted to buy old books, and I said, well, okay, and finally he gave me $25, but he didn't want to give me anything.
Really?
Did he ever give it to you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I gave away 12 boxes of books in Lincoln before I moved here.
Yeah.
But,
Because it's a lot to move those.
Oh,
I still
yeah.
have about 250, 300.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But, well, that little bookstore in Lincoln was a campus bookstore, and they had done some really nice things for a couple of friends of mine.
Uh-huh.
They hired his wife. She was just volunteering there, and they decided to hire her. And it just made a big difference. And so they said, well, if you come back on Friday, we have somebody who will assess the books and give you some money for them. I said, no, this is a gift.
Toothpick.
Yeah. That's
oh,
wonderful.
yeah, I do.
That
Can't
is.
think of it, yes.
Well, the miracle was that I had these 12 boxes in the car.
Yeah, I
There
gonna
was
say,
no
you're-
parking around
you
this
have to tell me
bookstore.
how to do it.
So I went around behind the building, and there were a few spaces back there, and so I opened the back of the vehicle, and I thought, okay, maybe I can carry these one at a time.
Mhm.
2 guys came down the fire escape, you
Yeah.
know, and I said, could you take these into the bookstore? Oh, yeah, because I'd have to go all the way around the store with them. They said, oh, yeah, we can do that. They loaded up the whole business and took them into the store for me.
Mm. Yeah. Well, think of what's in our archive room.
Yeah,
There's stuff there that you can't get anywhere.
no,
I've got some books that were test bindings. Unity tried them out to see if they wanted to make them. I've got
Yeah,
2
I know.
books, Lessons in Truth, and one other that are in tan canvas. It was done for World War
Probably already up.
One
huh,
for the soldiers.
oh my gosh.
carry, that it was more durable
Yeah.
and went with their uniforms. It's amazing. I haven't even seen those at Uni Village in the archives when that was all open and available. I have some books that came from a person who was head of the publishing department, and it's amazing stuff.
Well, it's been going on for over 100 years, so there's bound to be some stuff.
And there's a lot of,
Yeah.
we've got just about every daily word, every unit in magazine, and the others, just about every one. At least up to 40s. 1940s, because I didn't care much about the later stuff.
Yeah.
We still do have a lot of that, but I just didn't care about keeping it up to date today. Now I don't really care much of what they're printing now these days.
Yeah.
But it's just amazing. I don't have to go anywhere. I just go in there and get material.
Yeah, a friend copied the original Science of Mind book
Yeah.
for me.
Yep.
Because I had the second one. But, I looked at the original one and it was not well organized.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little, it was just a little sing-songy to try to get to what they were talking about and so forth. And I think that's why they edited and republished it in order to put it in some kind of readable order.
Mm-hmm.
I've got books. I've got one book that a fellow in San Jose brought to me, and it was in his family, and it was one of those individual printings by an early teacher, like late 1890s to 1900, and it was a little leather book with gold edging on all of the pages.
Mm-hmm.
And inside there, the first letter of every chapter was colored and so forth. And it was unity teaching, kind of teaching. It was early
You
spiritual
don't remember
stuff.
the name of it, do you?
Mm-mm.
What it looked like?
I-
What's the shape of the book?
It was about this size. I asked him if he minded if I would copy it, and he said, no, go ahead. So in my files somewhere, I have a copy of that book. And I can fish that out if you'd like to see it.
Have you seen the Eugene Fersen book, Science of Being?
Maybe.
Let me get it and see if this. That's what I thought of when you started describing it.
Okay.
Knees. 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 I've got you.
This one John Rankin told me about. When they were sitting at his kitchen table having coffee, and he said that May Rowland told him about this book, and he said, you might like it.
Ye gods.
He didn't tell me this was going to cost me $250.